again. We're here on YouTube and Facebook. We are talking about A Wander in the Spirit Land by the Spirit Franchezzo, transcribed by the medium A. Farnese, and we're going to talk about Chapter 1, My Death. And let me tell you, I am Brian Foster. I am bringing you this live stream so we can discuss this book. A lot of people have asked for this book, and I'm going to read it, go through it chapter by chapter, and compare what the Spirit Franchezzo says compared to what the Spiritist literature has told us here on Earth. So this hopefully shall be very interesting. But before I begin, please subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button, so people can know about us, and we can spread the knowledge of the spirit world far and wide, because Spiritism does give us some marvelous information. So let me start right with the book. So the preface by the transcriber, which is A. Farnese, was dated 1896. And he says, the following narrative was written more than a year ago, and in giving it to the public, I do not claim to be its author, since I've only acted the part of a psychographer and endeavored to write down as truthfully and carefully as I could the words given to me by the spirit author himself, who is one of several spirits who desired me to write down for them their experiences in the spirit world. I've had to write the words as fast as my pen could travel over the paper, and many of the experiences described in opinions advanced are quite contrary to what I myself believe to be in accordance with the conditions of the life in the world of spirits. The spirit author, Franchezzo, I have frequently seen materialized, and he has been recognized on these occasions by friends who knew him in the earth life. Having given the narrative to the public as I received it from the spirit author, I must leave with him all responsibility for the opinions expressed and the scenes described. So as usual, there's always different, the spirit world, the spirit realm, I should say, is varied. And people who have preconceived ideas of what they think heaven looks like, or how we become part of the whole when we die, when Spiritism tells us we actually are who we are, but we are plugged in more to the kind of the universal cloud, the universal information, and what you think, thought is action in the spirit world. So there's immense variety. And so it's hard to say anything is the absolute truth, because there's so much to it, and there's so many little nooks and crannies. Just like Jesus said, my mansion has many rooms. It does indeed. So let's see what Franchezzo says. This is his dedication by the author. Of course, the Farnese psychographed it. And psychograph is just like Chico Xavier, where a spirit, will talk through him, through his mind, and then he will write down the thoughts. So this is what Franchezzo told him to say for the dedication. To those who toil still in the midst and darkness of uncertainty which veil the future of their earthly lives, I dedicate this record of wanderings of one who has passed from earth life into the hidden mysteries of the life beyond, in the hope that through my experiences now given to the world, some may be induced to pause in their downward career and think ere they pass from the mortal life, as I did, with all unrepentant sins thick upon them. It is to those of my brethren who are treading fast upon the downward path that I would fain hope to speak, with the power which truth has over those who do not blindly seek to shut it out. For if after the consequence of a life spent in dissipation and selfishness are often terrible even during the earth life, they are doubly so in the spirit world, where all the disguise is stripped from the soul, and it stands forth in all its naked hideousness of its sins, with the scars of the spiritual disease contracted in its earthly life, stamped upon it in spirit's form, never to be effaced but by the healing powers of sincere repentance and the cleansing waters of its own sorrowful tears. So, what he just said completely corresponds to Spiritism. Of course, we would say it differently. First, Spiritism does not like to use the word sins. We use the word wrongs. And those wrongs are what we know to be against the set of divine laws called our conscience and our mind that we should weigh everything against. And when you pass over the spirit world, you know, if you've learned to try and rationalize and ignore your conscience on earth, that doesn't work when you go to the spirit world. You feel the negative things that you've done. The wrongs you've done actually gives you mental pain. And that is why when people start out in the lower zone and they try to rise up to heaven, they go through quite pain, because they kind of have to burn that pain off and know that, you know, this is what I've done wrong, and they feel it more and more as they go up. And it's not an easy process. So I'll carry on. I now ask these dwellers upon earth to believe that if these weary travelers of the other life can return to warn their brothers, yet on earth they are able to do so. I would have them understand that spirits who materialize have a higher mission to perform than even the solation of those who mourn in deep affliction for the beloved they have lost. I would have them look and see that even now, at the 11th hour of man's pride and sin, these spirit wanderers are permitted by the Great Supreme to go back and tell them the fate of all who outrage the laws of God and man. I would have even the idle and frivolous to pause and think whether spiritualism be not something higher, holier, nobler than the passing of an idle hour in speculations as to whether there are occult forces which can move a table or rap out the alphabet. Of course, that was very popular back in the 1800s. Right? That's what started Allan Kardec with Spiritism. We digress for a second. In the 1850s, table rapping was all the rage, and people got together and held hands, and spirits would rap the table. Now, those were, sometimes they were fake, but I would say most of the times that would be spirits would rap the table. Lower spirits, you know, spirits can do that. Higher spirits can do that, but they don't go down to that level. But when Allan Kardec, you know, he started this, because he didn't believe any of this. He didn't believe in the spirit realm. But when things, you know, they were pretty frivolous when they were around. But then when Allan Kardec was at the table, things got pretty, you know, serious. And he was finally told, no, you're here for a mission. You're here to write the Spirit's book, and we're going to use your pen name, Allan. Your pen name will be Allan Kardec, which was a name he had when he was a Druid priest, maybe who knows how many years ago in another life. So from table tapping started all that. A lot of that was the Fox sisters in the United States when they heard rapping, and they thought it was a spirit. They said, well, rap the letters, right? It was pretty slow. And then they got psychographing, where people would just write things down, and things progressed from then. Of course, that was what Allan Kardec found, was all organized by the Spirit of Truth, who has promised us in the New Testament, is I will bring you more information, and I will bring you the Spirit of Truth. We'll reveal more, and that's what was done. Now, why reveal more in the 1850s? The Spiritism tells us that they talk to us and communicate to us in the level that is pertinent to us given our social and technological advances. And if you have read some of the communications from Reverend G. Vallow in the 1910s and 20s, you really needed to understand, like, the atom, and then there's a lot of hints in there that really is talking about, like, data structures and cell phones, and those things would come along 60, 70 years later, but imagine them trying to talk in those concepts during the Old Testament or even during the New Testament. It was a what, right? And then also the negative things that we hear, like in the Old Testament, when they say, go attack that town and kill everybody in it. It sounds pretty harsh, but let's remember, at the primitive state of mankind at that point, they were given orders and said, no, you got to learn to follow orders. Just like someone going through boot camp, right? They're torn down. They said, no, you go follow orders, and then they're given more and more choices, free will, like one could say, as they mature. So let me finish. So then he said, as a warrior who has fought and conquered, I look back upon the scenes of those battles and the toils through which I have passed, and I feel that all have been cheaply won. All has been gained for which I hoped and strove. I seek now but to point out the better way to others who are yet in the storm and stress of battle. that they may use the invaluable time given to them upon earth to enter upon and follow with unfaltering step the shining path which shall lead them home to rest in peace at last. Of course, that's what I've said in many presentations. We are on earth. We are on earth not to have the latest toys or the biggest house or the yacht or the private plane. We are on earth to change our personality and our character. And there's nothing more important in that. And any goods that you may get is just superfluous. It's not important. Now, if you make your money honestly, there's not, get as much as you want, but don't let it crowd out your time to do some spiritual learning and spiritual investigation and analysis of your own self. Okay, well, let's start the book. Part 1, Days of Darkness, Chapter 1, titled My Death. I have been a wanderer through a far country in those lands that have no name, no place, for you of earth, and I would set down as briefly as I can my wanderings, that those whose feet are pointed to that bourne may know what may in their turn await them. On earth and in my life on earth, I lived as those who do seek only how the highest point of self-gratification can be reached, like many of us, like me before years ago, right? If I was not unkind to some, if I was indulgent to those I love, yet it was ever with the feeling that they in return must minister to my gratification, that from them I might purchase my gifts and my affection, the love and homage which was as my life to me. I mean, how honest is that? This is where some of these books, like the Memoirs of a Suicide, and already this book is, you can tell they're just brutally honest. Like, I never did anything altruistically. And I still feel like sometimes I do things and it's like, well, how can that benefit me? And boy, that's a hard habit. And I'm not even there yet. I like to be. I like to keep improving, but it's tough. It's been years. We carry on. I was talented, highly gifted, both in mind and person. And from my earliest years, the praise of others was ever given to me and was ever my sweetest incense. No thought ever came to me of that, of all self-sacrificing love, which can sink itself so completely in the love for others that there is no thought, no hope of happiness, but in securing the happiness of the beloved ones. In all my life, and amongst those women whom I loved, as men of earth too often miscall that which is but a passion too low and base to be dignified by the name of love. Amongst all those women who from time to time captivated my fancy, there was not one who ever appealed to my higher nature sufficiently to make me feel that this was true love, the ideal for which in secret I sighed. In everyone I found something to disappoint me. They loved me as I loved them, no more, no less. The passion I gave won, but its counterpart from them, and thus I passed on unsatisfied, longing for I knew not what. Mistakes I made, oh, how many. Sins I committed, not a few, yet the world was often at my feet to praise me and call me good and noble and gifted. I was feted, caressed, the spoiled darling of the dames of fashion. I had but to woo to win, and when I won, all turned to bitter ashes in my teeth. And then there came a time upon which I shall not dwell, when I made the most fatal mistake of all, and spoiled 2 lives where I had wrecked but one before. It was not a golden flowery wreath of roses that I wore, but a bitter chain, fetters as of iron, that galled and bruised me till at last I snapped them asunder and walked forth free. Free? Ah, me! Never again shall I be free, for never for one moment can our past errors and mistakes cease to dog our footsteps and clog our wings while we live. Aye, and after the life of the body is ended, till one by one we have atoned for them, and thus blotted them out from our past. Now, in what he says, there's truth to that, but there's also not a unrelenting pain from your past mistakes. That would be horrible. You learn, as you rise in heaven, you learn to understand your frailties, and you learn to understand your mistakes, and you seek to correct them, and you seek to analyze and alter your personality. But you after you've gone through and you've trained and you've learned more about the spirit world, you've learned why you're on Earth. Look, we're on Earth, not because if we were perfect, we wouldn't be on this planet of atonement. We would be on an advanced planet. So we all have something to atone for, right? We all have wrongs to right. And that is why, you know, you're discouraged by the spirit world to just focus on everything you've ever done wrong and feel terrible about it. No, you got to say, okay, yeah, I need to improve that, and then plan on how to improve it. Don't let it drag you down into deep depression. That's not what they want. They want people. They want good students. They want disciplined students. They want intellectually curious students. They want students who work hard. And working hard is two things: working hard on your personality and your morality and spirituality and your intellectual side. It's always a balance. You don't rise in heaven with one not balanced with another. Okay, let me carry on. And then it was, while I deemed myself secure from all love, when I thought I'd learned all that love could teach, knew that all women had to give, that I met one woman. Oh, what shall I call her? She was more than mortal woman in my eyes, and I called her the good angel of my life. And from the first moment that I knew her, I bowed down at her feet and gave her all the love of my soul, of my higher self, a love that was poor and selfish when compared to that which it should have been, but it was all I had to give, and I gave it all. For the first time in my life, I thought of another more than of myself, and though I could not rise to the pure thoughts, the bright fancies that filled her soul, I thank God I never yielded to the temptation to drag her down to me. And so time went on. I sunned myself in her sweet presence. I grew in holy thoughts that I had deemed had left me forever. I had dreamed sweet dreams in which I was freed from those chains of my past that held me so cruelly, so hardly. Now, when I sought for better things, and from my dreams I have revoked the fear that another might win her from me. Of course, he's feeling that he doesn't deserve her because she is morally superior to him. And, of course, she being morally superior will stand by him and help him improve. And to the knowledge that I, alas, had not the right to say one word to hold her back, all me. The bitterness and the suffering of those days, I knew it was myself alone who had built that wall between us. I felt I was not fit to touch her, soiled as I was in the world's ways. How could I dare to take that innocent, pure life and link it to my own? At times, hope would whisper it might be so, but reason said ever no. And though she was so kind, so tender to me, that I had read the innocent secret of her love, I knew, I felt, that on earth she would be mine. Her purity and her truth raised between us a barrier I could never pass. I tried to leave her in vain, as a magnet is drawn to the pole, so I was ever drawn back to her, till at last I struggled no more. I strove only to enjoy the happiness that her presence gave. Happy that at least the pleasure and the sunshine of her presence was not denied me. And then, there came for me an awful and unexpected day, when, with no warning, no sign to awaken me to my position, I was suddenly snatched from life and plunged into that gulf, that death of the body which awaits us all. Of course, death got him unawares, as many of us. And I knew not that I had died. I passed from some hours of suffering and agony into sleep, deep, dreamless sleep. And when I awoke, it was to find myself alone in total darkness. I could rise, I could move. Surely I was better, but where was I? Why this darkness? Why was no light left with me? I arose and groped as one does in a dark room, but I could find no light. Hear no sound. There was nothing but the stillness, the darkness of death around me. Now, he's describing his death. Everyone has somewhat different. And one of my YouTube videos, I described, these are the three things that can happen to you after you die. One is if you've lived a decent life, you can be assisted when you die. You'll have your friends around you, maybe you may not recognize them at first because you're confused, right? It's the opposite of birth. You're confused coming out of the womb, And you're going to be confused leaving your physical body. But they'll help you come out. They'll help you rest. They'll take you to like a little sanitarium or hospital until you reorient yourself. They'll make it as slow as you need it. And they're not going to tell you about your past life. You're not going to remember your past life until you are ready. It may take years for you to have that recall when you're ready to understand what you have done so terrible in past lives, if that happened. The second thing can happen is you sleep. This is what happens when someone is a very dedicated atheist and they believe that when they die, they just die. There's nothing left. So, of course, in the spirit world, your mind controls what? Action, right? Thought is action. Well, your mind thinks you're dead, and your definition of death is sleep. So you just sit there and you're turned off practically. So that's why I tell people who are like that, just have a little open mind there that things, your environment can change, and just think, oh, this could be death. Because it takes weeks, sometimes years to wake those people up. They have to put magnetic passes, other spirits have to work on them and get them to realize that they are not into nothingness. And then the third thing is all sorts of variations of how people die. They could die with other spirit, kind of immature, ignorant, not very good spirits around them. They can die like for Franchezzo, where he just dies in darkness and alone. He's got to kind of find what's going on. There are just all sorts of differences. People can die and wander around on the surface of the earth and go talk to people. And of course, those people don't listen to them. And I've been in mediums meetings where people don't even know they're dead. Of course, just like Franchezzo, he didn't think he was dead because after all, he's got a body, right? He's got his paraspirit. So, and he can feel himself. He's not ethereal, as far as he knows. He is kind of, as compared to ratio of matter to energy compared to us physical humans on Earth, but that's not what he feels. So, then he says, then I thought I would walk forward and find the door. I could move, although slowly and feebly, and I groped on. For how long I knew not. It seemed hours. For my growing horror and dismay, I felt I must find someone, some way out of this place. And to my despair, I seemed never to find any door or wall or anything. All seemed space and darkness around me. There's a dog barking, so pardon for that. Overcome at last, I called out aloud. I shrieked. No voice answered me. Then again and again I called, and still the silence. Still no echo, even from my own voice, came back to cheer me. I bethought of her I loved, but something made me shrink from uttering her name there. Then I thought of all the friends I had known, and I called on them, but none answered me. Was I in a prison? No. A prison has walls, and this place had none. Was I mad? Delirious? What? I could feel myself in my body. It was the same, surely the same. No, that's what I just said. He's feeling his paraspiritual body. It's not the same, but it feels the same to him. No, there was some change in me. I could not tell what, but I felt as though I had shrunken and deformed. My features, when I passed my hand over them, seemed larger, coarser, distorted, surely. All for a light. So let's talk about that. When you die, you look as you spiritually are. And if you think you're kind of a reprobate and not a good person, you will shrink in size. Although that doesn't mean the spiritual or immature are always smaller than the higher spirits. There can be spirits in the lower zone of the dark abyss that are quite huge and muscular. They're ugly, but they take on that dominating, force, that dictatorial, tyrannical force, and it'll be big. And then you'll especially in the books by Jiva Owens, I talk about in my first book of the series, Heaven and Below, where if once these pretty big dictators start turning and say, I don't like this life, they'll actually shrink because they will lose that desire to dominate all around them. And they will say they won't care that they look bigger than everybody else, and they'll get smaller and smaller as they get more normal and they feel themselves to be more normal. So, people they look how they think they should look. And in the lower zones, there's people that look like, werewolves and ugly things. There's even the writings in the last one I went over, where people are made to be animals by the dominating spirits because they want the right horses. And I said, no, you're going to be a horse. That's how evil and how bad some of these people are. You don't want to be in those areas. Now, some of the lower zones aren't so bad. People are together. They have towns and cities. They have factories. Sometimes you have to work as slaves in those factories. But it's an organized society. It's not just people wandering around like zombies. It's more like societies of mafia-like, chiefs that group people together and they dominate them. And they don't make life horrible for everybody. They have their own command and control structure. But the problem is to rise in one of those command and control structures, you got to be pretty cruel to everybody else. So it's not really good for your path to ascension when you try to rise up. So let me carry on. Okay. My features, when I pass my hand over them, seem larger, coarser, distorted, surely. Oh, for a light. Oh, for anything to tell me even the worst that could be told. Would no one come? Was I quite alone, and she my angel of light? Oh, where was she? Before my sleep had been with me, where was she now? Well, she was with him at the time. Something seemed to snap in my brain and in my throat. I called wildly to her by name, to come to me, if but for once. I felt a terrible sense as if I had lost her, and I called and called to her wildly, and for the first time my voice had a sound and rang back to me through that awful darkness. Below me, before me, far, far away, came a tiny speck of light like a star that grew and came nearer and nearer till at last it appeared before me as a large ball of light in a shape like a star. And in the star I saw my beloved. So let's talk about that for a second, what he saw. So I've used this diagram before, but I want to show it to people again, which is the spirit and the paraspirit. So a spirit really is like a ball of light, has no form. It's an encapsulation of logic, right? We are all spirits. We are encapsulated, and what spirits always call it like personalities. We are personalities. We have our character, our personality, we've got our past history, we have all the languages, everything is in there. We're artificial intelligences in a way of speaking. But we have feelings. It's not that we're just robots. We have feelings, we have desires, sometimes too many desires, but that's what we are at the core of things. But so don't be depressed in that. Think of that as marvelous. Like we are immortal and we can grow, and there's nothing stopping us from gathering more knowledge and being nicer people. There's nothing stopping us. Now, he saw that ball of light. Then he started seeing her, and that's when he started seeing her paraspirit. The paraspirit is the connection between the spirit and the body. And when we are in this physical body, like here right now, the paraspirit covers me, and the paraspirit connects to every cell of the body. Every cell. And you're only dead when that paraspirit, that cord is disconnected. Then your body really starts decomposing. So the paraspirit is what you think you look like. And that's what I'm saying. So like if you go to heaven and you're like my age, I'll look younger, right? As I go, because I will shape my outside to be how I think I should look. If you're younger when you die, let's say you're 19 or 20, you may go back to where your 30s and how you think you look. Of course, in the lower zone, you kind of look how you think you look, but sometimes that's not very healthy. So, but that is what happened. Now, so the paraspirit. So he started seeing her paraspirit. Her eyes were closed as of one in sleep, but her arms were held out to me, and her gentle voice said in those tones I knew so well, "Oh, my love, where are you now? I cannot see you. I can only hear your voice. I only hear you call to me, and my soul answers to yours." Now, this probably happened to her. She was probably asleep, and she was pulled by his unconscious longing to him. And she probably, even at that moment, still doesn't know in her physical life that he's dead. but her soul was called. Her soul may have been wandering somewhere in the spirit world, and then she was called to him. So then he said, I tried to rush to her, but I could not. Some invisible force held me back, and around her seemed a ring which I could not pass through. In an agony, I sank to the ground, calling upon her to leave me no more. Then she seemed to grow unconscious. Her head sank back upon her breast, and I saw her float away from me as though some strong arms had borne her. That's probably exactly what happened. She probably had a higher spirit there helping her go to him, but not letting him touch her or do anything. And it said he could not get close to her. The higher spirit probably had this shield, right, of higher spirituality around her. Of course, he could not get through that, right? Because as a higher environment spirit is your lower spirit, you can't stand that vibration and that harmony. So I sought to rise and follow her, but could not. It was as if a great chain held me fast, and after some fruitless struggles, I sank upon the ground in unconsciousness. When I awoke again, I was overjoyed to see my beloved one had returned to me. She was standing near, looking this time as I had seen her on earth, but pale and sad and all dressed in black. She had probably been awake and knew about his death. The star was gone, and all around was darkness, yet not utter darkness, since around her was a pale, faint glow of light by which I could see she carried flowers, white flowers in her hands. She stooped over a long, low mound of fresh earth. So he's seen his death. I drew nearer and nearer and saw that she was silently weeping as she laid down the flowers on that low mound. Her voice murmured softly, oh my love, will you never come back to me? Can you indeed be dead and gone where my love cannot follow you? Where you can hear my voice no more, my love, oh my dear love. She was kneeling down now, and I drew near, very near, though I could not touch her. And as I knelt down too, I looked at that long, low mound. A shock of horror passed over me, for I knew now at last that I was dead, and this was my grave. Not a wonderful discovery. And of course, this has happened with other spirits, is they will all of a sudden discover, like, oh, that's my grave. And they will walk. And interesting, Andre Luis did an interview with a man who just died. Now, he was a spiritist, so he knew what was going on. Andre Luis was talking about a thing called Demas, and the spirits helped him disconnect from his body. And then Andre Luis says, well, how do you feel? And he goes, well, I feel okay, because if I'm not thinking of my physical body, I feel that I'm not hungry or thirsty or anything. But when I think of my earthly life, then I feel hungry and I feel thirsty. And so then Andre, they were actually walking together with other spirits and other humans, physical form, for his funeral. And he kept asking him questions, and Demas said, yeah, I feel okay. I feel alert. I know what's going on. The main thing is, I feel very healthy. But again, when I turn my mind towards my physical existence, I feel less healthy, hungry, etc. And of course, that is a truism. And so in heaven, the first levels of heaven, and I talk about this in my book, Heaven and Below. Let me bring that up. In the first levels of heaven, people are still somewhat tied to the material plane. If you have a house you love, or you're very involved with your family, very normal thinking, and you worry about every little thing they do, and you want to hear about your family, and you feel the ups and downs with your family, or you feel longing for that belonging or possessions you've had, means you're still materially tied. And of course, a lot of people stay in the lower zones and stay, there's been stories of people staying in museums. They didn't want to leave that favorite picture or that piano or mirror, whatever object of art that was. They don't want to leave it there, so still tied to earth. And so these people at the lower level of heavens, they're affected by people's minds, right? So when people die and they, oh, I wish Uncle Matthew was back with me. And it's not a healthy thing to do that. You should always wish people, you say, oh, I'm glad you're in heaven. Learn what you can. You're much better off. I'm here still doing my trial. You know, don't worry about me. I'll pray for you. That's how you should approach these things. Because when you have that longing, oh, I wish he was here, then they feel depressed. They feel that longing. Now, as they go higher and higher in the levels of heaven, they understand that the family you have on earth, they're all going through their trials. Yeah, there's going to be ups and downs. But first, they're immortal. If a bad accident happens, or they're really depressed about something, or their boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other just devastated them, well, that was the lesson they needed to learn. I mean, I don't want to be frivolous about it, but we're all going through these lessons. And then so they get higher and higher, and they go, well, they're going through their lessons. They're learning. God bless them. They're atoning for what they did wrong, or they're exploring new avenues, right? People on earth, it's not all about atoning for our past wrongs. Sometimes we're just given more experiences, because what's our end goal? Our end goal is to become a productive member of spirit society. And what does that mean? It means we have immense mental power to create things. We'll actually lead whole races and lead like vegetation and the evolution of things and other planets. So we can also help other spirits become pure spirits. And of course, that entails great creative power with your mind. And to have that great creative power with your mind, you have to be cool and calm, loving, fraternal, and charitable, and knowledgeable in all situations. You can't be like I've been in the past, where I get angry or I get petulant, right, or jealous of something. That's not going to work. You're not going to graduate like that. So they know, these higher levels have, that these are things you have to rip out, these primitive emotions. You've got to defeat them, right? And believe me, I know how hard. I'm still not anywhere there, but you got to like every day rewire your brain, I should say. Stop gossiping about people. Don't say mean things about people. Say good, positive things about people. I know, especially at work, right? And maybe with your close friends. That's our entertainment in life, is gossiping, but don't, right? You know, you might get information. Like it's with Socrates' rule of three with gossiping, right? Is it true about the person? Is it beneficial about the person, or is it beneficial to the person you're talking to? If it's none of those, can it? And, you know, as another example, as I used to go to work, I get off the ferry and I walk through the streets of Seattle. And, you know, before I became a spiritist, I'd see bums, like, oh, that bum, they should get him out of here, right? Not very charitable, not nice. Now I recognize, I say, oh, God bless you, God help you. You've really going through a hard trial. This is tough on you, and you made some bad choices, but I hope things get better for you. That doesn't mean I indulge them. I mean, if so many of these people are addicted to something, you know, I won't give them money. I'll give them food and things like that. But a lot of times they'll say, no, I don't want the food. But that's up to them. It doesn't mean I'm a pushover, but I don't think mean thoughts, and that's something we all have to go through. And I understand it. That's not easy. So, and I talk a lot about, you know, where Franchezzo is right now. And he's in the lower zone or the dark abyss. He's not in his own little area right now. He hasn't been exposed to other people yet. He will be in our next live streaming. So remember, Sundays and Tuesdays, I live stream around 5 or 6 o'clock, depending on the time zone, Eastern time. And of course, other time zones around the world. So I try to do live Sundays and Tuesdays. And so please explore my books, explore the Spirits book. The Spirits book, which is a wonderful book. And I have that in Audible, right? In Audible format, audio format. And is also have it every chapter in my YouTube playlist, the Spirits book, which you can listen to it. And you can also download the Audible file from my blog, mwspiritism.com. You can also put in the Spirits book, Allan Kardec, PDF, and it will show you where to get the PDF for free. I also have a link to it in my book. My other book I have free on PDF is Spiritism 101, The Third Revelation. That is free on PDF, which you can get. Again, on my blog, there's a link to it. It's also translated into French, and so is my book, The Problem and Solution, is translated into French. That's those two books. Well, the Spiritism 101 is free, but it's also free in French, but it's not in English because the translator said, no, I don't think it's good enough to have someone pay for it. I said, fine. I just posted them all on the site for anyone who wants it in French. So yeah, so go to the site and get that. Get introduced into Spiritism. And when you want to know more, please read my book, Kevin, below. I have that in Kindle, paperback, and Audible format. So it's on in that format. So it's whatever way you would like to learn the best. So I want to thank everyone for being with me tonight, and say God bless everyone. And please, share this video if you can. Look at other videos. Explore Spiritism. It's so fascinating to finally find out why you're here and why all these weird things happen to you all the time. Well, we've got explanations.